Okay, I will call the July 19th Select Board meeting to order. I am remote tonight, so I'm going to hand over running of the meeting to the Vice Chair, Brooke Moore, since she's present in the room. But unfortunately, we will have to do everything by roll call. And I will turn it over to you, Brooke, to lead the pledge.
Okay, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, the meeting has been called to order. The agenda is being accepted with no changes that I'm aware of. Okay, announcements. Libby?
This meeting is being video and audio recorded, and we, as part of the Select Board's committee appointment policy, we have a number of applications received for round 2 of 2023 committee vacancies. And at this point, the names would be read in accordance with the policy. Do you want to read them? Thank you. For the Agricultural Commission, we have 1 seat available and 1 applicant, Kelly Steffen. Cemetery Commission, we have 1 seat available and 1 applicant, Alan Reinhard. Council for Human Services, we have 3 seats available and 3 applicants, Claudia Valley, Sarah Wright, and Kelly Steffen. Sorry, give me a second. Council on Aging, we have 1 seat available and 0 applicants. Cultural Council, we have 2 seats available and 0 applicants. Finance Committee, we have 1 seat available and 1 applicant, Joseph Wright. Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, 1 seat available and 1 applicant, James Sherlin. Planning Board Alternate, 1 seat available and 3 applicants, John Kitchener, Cameron Murphy, and Kelly Steffen. Real Estate Assessment Committee, 2 seats available and 1 applicant, Nathaniel Lowell. The Town Council Study Committee, the number of seats and terms are yet to be determined, but we did receive a number of applications. Peter Schaefer, Michael Alvarez, Jericho Mille, Bo Barber, Curtis Barnes, Donna Martino, who is going to be the Advisory Committee on Non-Voting Taxpayers representative, Jill Veith, Jeff Carlson, John Riccio, Hillary Hedges-Rayport, Kelly Steffen. And then we did have 2 applications that came in late. And I am putting them out there for you guys can decide whether or not you want to accept them. Joe Grouse and Caroline Baltzer. And then the Tree Advisory Committee, we have 3 seats available and 2 applicants, Whit Bourne and Mary Longacre.
Thank you, Erica.
Lastly, there is no Select Board meeting next Wednesday, the 26th of July, and the board's next meeting will be August 2nd on the summer schedule.
Thank you. Any comments or announcements from the Select Board members? Okay, seeing none. We don't have any follow-up on comments from prior Select Board meetings. Now is the time for public comment on items that are not on the agenda this evening. And as a reminder, our public comment policy is 3 minutes. Tom, would you mind setting a timer? And I see 1 hand raised online. And Megan, are you did I see you stand up? Okay, there are 2 people online. We'll start with Meredith Lepre.
Hi, I just was following up, I guess, my question from last week about how the fire department is supposed to respond to boat fires or boat emergencies, such as when the people were rescued this past week or when there's a fire on Tuckernuck. I did hear sort of through the grapevine, but nothing official from the town, that there is a marine response unit, but I just would like an answer, I guess, from the town of what is the answer for this. If there's a marine response, like who is responsible, who's involved. I know the fire department used to have jet skis and a boat, and I guess at some point that was all taken away. So I'm just concerned as someone that works at Addiction Solutions, if we have someone that has a medical emergency on a boat and the fire department can't get out there where they have paramedics, I just wonder how we're going to treat that.
The town manager said there'll be a response next week.
Thank you.
Next up, Bruce Mandell.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I just have a quick question because I have some comments about the short-term rental articles that are, I thought were included in the packet, and I didn't know if now is the time or we had to wait till some section in the town manager's report.
Bruce, that is part of the discussion about the warrant for special town meeting toward the end of the agenda.
Okay, so I'll raise my hand then.
Thank you. Megan?
Okay. My first question is I've sent the board a couple emails and very rarely do I get a reply. I'm just making sure I have the correct email address or that you guys do receive my emails and or read them. Yes. Anybody? Will we answer that next week? Like, I'm just,
respond and
okay.
tease you every time.
You respond. Yes,
And tell
you
you
do.
to tease you every
Okay,
time.
I'm just making sure everybody does receive them. So
Okay.
that's great. Thank you. And then about 2 weeks ago, I asked a question about the crisis communications team that was mentioned during the Pierce Cote contract. And I had asked who's on that, how that's established, what that looks like. Is there any answer for that, or do we know who that is?
We can get back to that next week too. There were a lot of questions in that public comment and they were hard to tell, quite
Okay.
frankly, if they were rhetorical or actual questions. So we can determine that. The crisis communications team changes depending on the crisis though, just
Okay.
FYI.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just wait to hear back on the email questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Okay. Any other public comment for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to, there's no new business that I'm aware of. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. Any questions from the board?
One question.
Your mic.
On page 3,
Which date, Malcolm?
the 12th, last week. On one period, I'm quoted here saying, no, that indicates that the majority of STRs are not owner occupied. I don't think I used the word majority. It would probably be a meaningful number, something to that effect. Because it's not the majority. I would suggest that alteration.
And that's on page 3.
Erica, may I ask what's the normal, we're recorded, so do we check it against recording or?
Yeah, I did not say that.
Yeah, normally I would watch the
I
recording
just didn't know.
and
procedurally.
then I would email Malcolm some proposed language from what I get from it. And then like I did with Matt the last time, and he says, yes, that's appropriate. But if you approve as amended, it'll be what was said.
Tonight,
Well, whatever's on the video when I go back and look
Okay.
at it.
okay, is that,
That's fine.
okay,
And I'll
all
make
right.
sure that Malcolm reviews it first.
I just didn't know how that was done, so, okay, so with that requested change, any questions on pending contracts, we can take a motion for all three.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Don Holgate,
Aye.
sorry, I surprised you first. Matt Fee,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
and I vote aye, Brooke Moore votes aye. Okay, thank you. Next up is citizen and departmental and committee requests, resignation acceptances for the short-term rental work group. We have received, Erica, do you want to run through the names for me?
Sure. We have received resignation letters from John Kitchener, Jim Sulzer, Karen Zagaiko, David Iverson, Peter Schaefer, and Kathy Baird. They've all been brought to the town clerk and stamped in, so it's just a matter of you formally accepting them.
Do I have a motion?
I would just like to discuss it real quick.
Okay.
I think
Is your mic
how,
on?
yeah, I think it is. Moving forward, how are we? One of the things I thought was gonna happen is I thought that there'd be some back and forth as we answered some of the questions. There were some known unknowns that they brought to us last week, and I'm sure as we dig into this, there are gonna be some unknown unknowns that were gonna have to be addressed, and I assumed we would address it through the committee. But if the committee's not there, is it gonna be just us, or is it going to be us and the alternates that are still remaining? Or what? Like, I'm just sort of wondering, what's the process? There was also a letter, one of the resignations claimed that we would not support it. And I was like thinking, wait a minute. Brooke asked, geez, what do you recommend? Would you guys stay together? And one of the members said, absolutely not. This was rough. And so I think that, I think the town, if asked, I think the town had planned to support it and had planned to give the backup necessary to keep going. But so anyway, so part of me doesn't want to accept the resignations, but I don't think that we have much choice on that. So.
Okay.
But what is the view of the board? What is the view of the administration in this situation?
Any other questions? I do have some thoughts on it.
Sorry, just to be clear, I'm recused from this.
Okay, right. Thanks, Don, for the reminder. It seems to me that I hadn't thought about the alternates. But as I moved away from the last week's meeting, I felt as though the work product has been handed to us, and that ultimately it's ours to establish the warrant. And so I would hope that the members of the work group who have resigned would be willing to answer questions if we ask them to. But I think it's not possible to have posted meetings in a work group with this many resignations. And given that their work product is nearly done, stepping in the alternates at this point doesn't seem to make sense to me. So I was actually going to suggest that we officially disband the work group and ask them to participate in our discussions going forward till we set the warrant and on to town meeting as private citizens who participated.
Is there backup if we need to bring in, Matt Haffenraffer or some of the others? Would that be considered part of? I know we have town council as necessary. I just want to make sure, because it was sort of claiming that we weren't giving that, we weren't doing this. And I don't think that was the intent. I'm just making sure I've got the intent right. I thought our intent was to follow this through as necessary.
Okay. I had a conversation with the finance director about the possibility of we would have to find the financial resources to extend or somehow issue a new contract for Process First to continue. Right. I think if the work group is not meeting, that the services of CBI and Stacy are probably not necessary at this point. But I would think that having Process First available for follow-up questions from this board is a worthy investment if we choose to direct town administration to find some funding for that and execute a new contract for a number of meetings if it's necessary. It's necessary.
No, and I agree with you. Thank you.
So for me at this point, I think the first step is to accept the resignations. And then perhaps the second step is to officially end the work group's work. And then the third step would be whether we decide to request funding for continued support from Process First. If anyone would like to move any of those ideas forward, I would be happy to take a motion. And then I'll let Dave speak after we get there.
So moved.
Okay, so for all three?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so by roll call, Tom Dixon?
Aye.
So the motion was to
Accept the
accept everybody's resignation,
resignation.
disband the committee as a whole, and then see if there's funding available for Process First to continue engaging.
Yep. to be present for future meetings of this board, and I would say public meetings if we hold them to answer questions.
With the understanding, we'll reach out to the work group or the 6 members or the 3 members as necessary.
And if I may add a friendly amendment to that,
I understand, but we know who they are. We know how to get them.
that we send
They're right here.
express our thanks to in writing to the group,
Yes.
to the individual members of the working group. Okay, so that said, by roll call, Tom Dixon.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb.
Aye.
Don Holgate.
She's recused.
Oh, that's right, she's recused, and I vote aye. So that passes unanimously. Okay, Dave, did you have a comment at this point?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. David Iverson, Planning Board member, Affordable Housing Trust member. I am speaking for neither of those groups tonight. I'm speaking for the short-term rental work group. Or 6 members of the short-term rental work group, to be exact. In the past 9 months, the short-term rental work group has worked together to identify policies that would address a variety of issues related to the short-term rentals. After careful and thoughtful consideration of many different options, we believe that our proposed package of policies makes the most sense. We believe it can do the most good with the least harm. It achieved a supermajority of support from the members of the work group. We achieved a consensus requested by the select board with at least 7 of the 9 members agreeing to the proposals. This phase is now complete. Upon reflection after last week's select board meeting, we realized that we no longer had a legal framework to continue meeting in an appointed town work group. It is true that we were frustrated by the reception of our package received from 2 members, but the primary reason we resigned was so that we can continue meeting and communicating with each other about the next steps. We felt that we had no choice but to resign in order to take our next task, education and advocacy, on. In any case, we want to be very clear that we do not consider our work to be done. We respectfully ask that our package and policies be placed on the warrant before the voters at the September special town meeting. We were tasked with carefully crafting policies that consider the diverse perspectives of Nantucket. We hope that our package is given the same careful consideration that we put into creating it. As a group, we hope to continue clarifying our proposal and the rationales for them. We want to explain the regulations and why we included each one, including those that extend protection to Nantucket families that need an STR to stay afloat financially, and those that help to curtail churn and are intended to help neighborhoods preserve their integrity. We are proud of our proposals, and we're looking forward to moving on to the next phase of our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And thanks to all of the members of the work group who are present here and on Zoom for the time you put into this process. And we'll be picking this up later as we talk about the warrant for special town meeting later on in the agenda. Okay. Update regarding short-term rental registration program. I'll toss this to our health director, Roberto Santamaria.
Good evening. So in light of everything that's been going on, we finally, and after a lot of prodding, we finally received an update from Granicus. Obviously, they're not here, but they did provide one in writing today at 2:30. I'm reading this out loud here. So the timeline for the mobile permitting module is what got impacted. They couldn't get that. They couldn't get people in the timeline here, but we did ask after Libby, Brian, and I did contact them multiple times. They did finally escalate it to a higher level of management to prioritize it. So it says here that project management, the project manager and management are working for all project resources to assess outstanding issues and provide updates as soon as confirmation is made. So what they're saying is the mobile permitting program is the one issue, that's the one sticking point. But they also claim in the same email that the mobile permitting process should be available for training starting on Wednesday of next week, when we have scheduled a 90-minute training with Michael Scanlon, a person on their training team, to train myself, Heather Nardoni in my office, John Hedden in my office, and Florencia in public information officer, to get all the training on the software. And they claim in the same email that after that training is done, we should go live. We've seen how sometimes these deadlines that they give themselves tend to get blown by, but at least they gave us an actual number this time, saying that after July 26th, we should be able to go live. And I will forward this email for the packet.
Thank you, Roberto. Any questions from the board? Matt?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I was just
Yep.
going to say, Roberto, thank you for staying on that with Granicus. I know it's been difficult going back and forth with them, and also possibly trying to get a refund out of some of the contract if possible. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah, my comment, this reminds me of the POS companies with restaurants. They promise you the world and they sell you really well, and then you spend, inordinate amounts of time either programming it yourself or, sort of debugging it. So I'm glad that we're taking a harder stance on it. And I would, just from my experience with those situations with a couple different companies, I would say stay on it until it is exactly what you want. And it is exactly what they have promised, because once you drop them, it's very difficult to get their attention again. So anyway.
That's an excellent comparison. Because we've seen exactly the same thing, especially during COVID, when people were switching over to Toast and DoorDash and all these other point of sales. They just try to give you whatever they have in their box without customizing it. But Florencia has really been on them about the customization to make sure it actually fits what we need from a user interface. Once we do the training on Wednesday, they'll enter the quality assurance, quality control side of it, which is where we provide what they use, user assessment. And that's where we provide our comments. But we have been on them, and thanks to Libby and Brian as well for being on them. They finally started listening.
Yeah, Roberto, one other thought, sorry, when I'm here, is if you can get a rep and someone who answers a phone or a number that is, I've had situations where it's impossible to get a hold of them. The company we have now is great. We call them any time of day and night and they're there, but the previous company wasn't. So I would, make sure when you're doing this, they're going to want to make you happy now. You're not married yet, you're still working on it. So good luck.
Absolutely.
Anybody else from the board have questions? Dawn?
Yeah, I just, I hope that after the training, it's going to be tested with some users to really see if it's actually functional the way we want it to be, and providing the right kind of information. Because I just think it's going to be incredibly important that this be really user friendly and working for not just the digital platforms, but for all of the other ways that leases are done on the island.
Absolutely. Actually, Florencia was on them on that, and they said they're going to provide us a spreadsheet, the UAT spreadsheet, user assistance or user assurance testing spreadsheet, and it'll walk us through all the questions and how to fill it out as a user. Once Florencia agrees from the user side as well, then we'll be able to roll it out to people here to provide their comments as well. And just like Matt said, we'll be on them until we get the exact product we want.
Yeah, and if we're not happy, I wouldn't put this in place, and I would consider going with someone else who might be able to do it better, which unfortunately I just want to make sure this is done right.
I agree.
works for us. So thank you.
And I think it's really important that we communicate with the community in terms of expectations and timelines, particularly any deadlines we establish for registration, making sure there's plenty of room for the bugs to be worked out in this before people feel as though they're up against a deadline that they can't meet because the software is not working or they're not able to use it. There will always be folks who struggle to use online platforms and software. So we want to make sure that people have time to comply as well. So, and great communication would be helpful to the community as well through the realtors and other social media outlets and so forth. So, okay. Any other questions? Okay. Next is a request for approval of application for change of manager of seasonal all alcoholic beverages hotel license for Nantucket Island Management LLC DBA Brant Point Grill / White Elephant from Bettina Landt, manager, to Bernhard Johannes. Sorry, I'm going to butcher this. Duermeir, manager, for premises located at 50 Easton Street. And Matt has recused himself. Amy, go ahead.
Thank you. This is just a basic administrative function. Anytime managers in charge of the liquor license and operations of the liquor license leave, we need to do a change of manager. These are for the White Elephant properties and Wauwinet. Just basically a change of staff. Staff are going down to Florida. Florida staff are coming up, all very qualified. No objections. If I could just take 1 minute to thank Bettina and Eric Landt, who are leaving, going down to Florida property, both manage White Elephant and Wauwinet over the years. Incredibly wonderful people. I know a lot in the community will miss. And Bettina especially has been an incredible partner and tremendous respect. So I just wanted to say thank you to them. And then again, the applications are for other staff in the company that are moving up into these positions.
And Amy, do you want, I read the first one. We should take these individually.
You
Erica
can.
said yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Ready for a motion?
Motion to approve the change of manager.
Second.
Okay, by roll call, Don Holgate.
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
and Brooke Moore votes aye. Okay, next up, request for approval of application for change of manager of seasonal all alcoholic beverages hotel license for Nantucket Island Management LLC DBA White Elephant Hotel Residences from Bettina Landt, manager, to Bernhard Johannes Duermeir, manager, for premises located at 19 South Beach Street. Amy?
I'll just reiterate for all three. This is 3 properties, same ownership, and just change of staff up into new positions. So no objections to any, and we have received all required documents.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board or motion?
Motion to approve change of manager.
Second. Sorry.
Who beat whom? Eric, I'll let you decide. Okay, all those in favor by roll call, Don Holgate. You're muted, Don.
Aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Brooke Moore votes aye. Okay, and last, request for approval of application for change of manager of seasonal all alcoholic beverages hotel license for Nantucket Island Management LLC DBA The Wauwinet Inn from Eric Landt, manager, to Jennifer Mandell Hudson, manager, for premises located at 120 Wauwinet Road. And Amy, I'm going to assume same holds.
Correct. Same company.
Great. Any questions or a motion?
Motion to approve change of manager.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call, Don Holgate.
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb.
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Aye.
And Brooke Moore votes aye. Okay. So on to town manager's report, continued review of potential warrant articles for November 7th, 2023 special town meeting, including proposed short-term rental articles. So the way we're going to do this, I'm going to have the town manager go through all the other articles other than the short-term rental articles first. She's just going to run through what's on there for us, and then we will we'll open the discussion about the short-term rental.
Erica, you're gonna put the list up because it's not in my packet. So while that's coming up, the list in the packet is from June 28th. I have not had a chance to update it. It hasn't changed much. I'm going to take you through each article and in fact, what has changed. We have an additional article that came to my attention today. So skipping the short-term rental articles, we have a zoning article that relates to the airport that came from Plus in the airport, and I will need them here to explain the need for that. We do have some real estate items, conveyance of a couple of easements to the land bank at East Creek Road, conveyance of some parcels to the land bank at Surfside Treatment Facility, and this is for compliance with a natural heritage endangered species permit requirements that's been outstanding for quite some time. So that really does need to get done. And we have potential additional easements in connection with the Surfside area water main extension project. We do have some appropriations for the board's consideration. Supplemental funding for the Wait Drive seasonal employee housing. That project is we have construction funding already for that project of $8 million. We are anticipating, hopefully we will not find that this becomes reality, but we are anticipating that bids might come in, and bids are supposed to go out before the special town meeting, might come in higher than the appropriation. And if so, we'll need to determine if we need to make an additional supplemental appropriation. So that's a bit of a hold, but we would want to put a placeholder on the warrant for that. The resubmittal of Article 15 from the 2023 annual town meeting. And as you all know, that related to improvements in an additional field at Nobodere for 3.8 million. And what happened was at town meeting, that article was defeated. However, it was approved at the ballot. It's a debt exclusion, so it requires affirmative votes from both town meeting and the election. So since we have the election vote, we would still need a town meeting vote. And if we want to proceed with that project,
Libby, they can go in either order, correct?
they can go
For
in
the
either
public.
order. Yep. Thank you. Yes. Supplemental funding for the airport's housing project. I don't have too much additional detail on that yet, but I'm asked to see if they can get that on. And the reappropriation of funds from fiscal 23 and 24 for a town employee rental housing assistance program that never has been able to get off the ground for a variety of reasons. You all got an email from me about that earlier in the week. We would like to reappropriate those funds to some other town employee housing projects. And then
Maybe right to the top of the list.
we could move that right to the top of the list. Yes.
Add it to that.
Libby, you skipped one, supplemental funding for NASHA.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, NASHOP. In fact, I talked with the sewer director today. There are ongoing discussions between the town and Richmond about that project. The pump station at NASHOP will have to be upgraded to accommodate the additional connections and flow from the development across the street from NASHOP at Richmond. And there were prior commitments to funding that upgrade. However, some time has passed, and that project is now substantially more cost. So discussions again are ongoing about what that cost exactly is. And I don't have a number right now, but
Just, can I make a comment on that?
yeah.
When we were talking about this, it was saving Richmond quite a bit of money to upgrade the pump station rather than build themselves an entirely new pump station. And this was that was the discussion that we had 5 or 6 years ago when this was all happening. So we should make sure to take that into consideration.
I think that I haven't been fully briefed on it yet, but I think there was a meeting last week between Richmond and town staff, including town council, about that. And I think, I don't know if John wants to comment on it, but the idea is that that's not a town expense to the extent possible. Is that correct, John?
Yes, Libby, we had provided our analysis of the updated costs for the pump station, and I think there's a continuing discussion about which portions of those costs are attributable to Richmond and which ones are not. Richmond was sent back from that meeting with the task of coming up with a detailed proposal back to the town in terms of the cost sharing. And so we're just waiting to hear from Richmond, and then we'll continue to have discussions with them.
And I can't help myself. I'm a little hesitant to ask the applicant who's trying to have the town pay more money I'm hesitant to accept that in a way. I feel like this was a good deal for them initially. And I think planning board probably would have required them to put their own pump station in. So they'd be paying all of it. So I just hope that we are, not rolling over. I think people sometimes think the town has a big pile of money, which we don't. And so, anyway.
Thanks, Matt. Libby, if I may ask, the supplemental funding for Wait Drive seasonal employee housing, would that require a ballot measure as well?
I don't think so, because I think I don't think we've totally resolved the funding source yet, because we don't know the number just yet, but it's possible that the rental housing assistance funds could be reappropriated to that. And, or there's one or two other sources. I mean, hopefully we're not talking millions more dollars. Hopefully we're not talking any more dollars, but we just don't know yet.
Yeah.
But I don't think it wouldn't require a debt exclusion.
Okay, thank you.
The other category is establishing a special purpose stabilization fund to allow for use of opioid settlement funds, which we're going to be getting for some period of time. And those would be, that stabilization fund that we're talking about is specifically for substance abuse needs. We would want to add the town-owned Shadbush Road site to the DPW facility design appropriation article, which, as you recall, at the 2023 annual town meeting, there's a appropriation that was approved for DPW design of a new DPW facility in 2016. And since 2016, we have had the coastal resiliency plan, and that is making the 188 Nantucket Road site look as though, as you all know, because we've talked about this, it need to be revisited as to whether or not the DPW facility would go there. So we were then looking at the Sun Island Road site, the Delta Field site, which is under the jurisdiction of the airport. We added that location to the article. And now we want to add, it's actually, I think it's Industry Road, not Shadbush, to the article as well, because that is where the hunting associations potential lease is located. And we have been discussing this with them, but as you know from prior presentations, that is a site that needs to be evaluated for potential DPW facility. But in order to access the funds, we need to add that location to the article. And then increasing the town clerk salary in accordance with the comp and class study. So there's two articles not on here. One I mentioned at the June 28th meeting, which is an article to authorize eminent domain taking of some property in the vicinity of the yet to be designed or constructed Somerset Lane bike path, but which is actively being worked on. And the other is something that came to my attention this week, which is a potential home rule petition in connection with the solar project at 1 Milestone Road. And I will have more information on that at your next meeting.
So any questions from the board on any of those sections of the warrant for fall town meeting? Okay, so we'll move on to the short-term rental articles. And I, after last week's meeting, walked away feeling as though the process of consensus building may not have been understood, that a work product comes out of something like that, but how we got from several attempts at town meeting to the work product that came out of the short-term rental work group. And I would like to offer the members of the former short-term rental work group the opportunity at this point in time to maybe articulate to the community a little bit about what that, if they're willing, what that process was like for them, and how you moved from a group of 9 people with different perspectives to a 7 out of 9 consensus set of warrant articles for us to consider. I think the process is important to understand as well. So if anybody's willing, putting that invitation out.
Brooke, I'm recusing from this.
Oh, thank you, Don, for again reminding. Thanks.
Well, I guess 10 months ago, a year ago, we got together. Oh, I'm sorry, Peter Schaefer, finance committee rep, but I'm not for the short-term rental group, but I'm not representing the short-term rental group anymore. We got together and there was 9 of us and we started to talk, and there was 8 volunteers and 1 paid member. I mean, the Act Now person is paid to come to the meetings. The rest of us were doing this obviously voluntarily. And we started out, we all talked about, where we stood. And maybe the reason that I'm up here is because I was probably one of the, my whole contention was, do we really need anything? Are we just sitting up here and wasting time? And Dawn Holgate said at one meeting, when she's on the select board as chairman, she said that maybe we should let the market make the corrections rather than us make the corrections. And I thought maybe she was right. And I'm not sure maybe she was right or not, doesn't really matter. But we sat down and we went from I'll call myself the left to Act Now being on the right, and everybody else falling in the middle, or tending to be left or to the right. And we spent a lot of time talking about this, everything from interviewing other towns and how they handled it, to talking about examples of our own experiences, to having people come to us sometimes in tears, worried that they were going to lose the ability to rent their property. And even to last week at the meeting, we had people come up to us in the lobby, still worried that they were going to possibly lose their opportunity to rent or summer rentals. So anyway, so we had this committee, and we sat and we talked and we talked and we talked. And, many of us, we'll mention Stacy for a second here. Many of us got fed up with Stacy from time to time. But I have to tell you, if we didn't have Stacy, it would have been very difficult to get 9 people to come up with an agreement that 8 of us agreed to. I will say, I'm not speaking for Peter Kahn, but Peter Kahn agreed to almost everything except for one lever that we had in the agreement. And that lever caused him to not vote in favor of the package. But he can speak for himself. I think he's here tonight. So this went on, and we kept talking and negotiating. We'd get to one point and we'd get to another point, and then we'd start all over again because we didn't agree. And some of the meetings got a little heated, but I have to say, being a hothead myself, this was a really well-behaved group. I really think that we listened to each other. When we listened to ideas, and we incorporated them when we could, and we really came to an agreement. Everybody moved in the direction of coming to consensus. I will say Act Now did not move. And they were the only one who really did.
Peter, I'm gonna ask you not to talk about other members, but talk about your experience, if you don't mind.
Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry. And we did, basically, I'm almost done. And we did work hard, and we did come to consensus. And I think there was issues. I mean, right up to the last meeting, we had issues. Whether if we didn't do one thing, then somebody had said they wouldn't vote for this or wouldn't vote for that. And we worked together, and we came up with a package that we think made a lot of sense. Our goal was to not only to make all of us happy as we could be, but to do something that would make sense for the town and the people that live in the town, without infringing on people's property rights, without infringing on people's finances, and doing something that was legal. And that's essentially how it worked.
Thank you, Peter.
John?
And Kathy, I'll have you go next. Online. Erica win.
Thanks, Peter. So John Kitchener, I'm a year-round resident for about 20 years or so. I'm a voter and a proud member of the short-term rental work group. Before I get into the process, though, I'd like to say a couple of other things. Like, why did I want so badly to be a member of the work group? I'm a at-large member of the work group, and it was this. I have attended the last 10 town meetings, and over the last 3, 4, 5 years, our island became so polarized over this subject of short-term rentals. I don't own a short-term rental. I used to rent before I owned my own home. But suddenly this thing was so contentious. And I just thought, you know, maybe I can add some value. And I was proud to be a part of that. The process we went through, you know, anyone who thinks that this was simple or they can come up with something, you know, in the last, you know, few weeks before, it's crazy. We met 25 times and had 60 hours of sometimes tough discussions to get where we got to. We, you know, a lot of people, most people in this room said at the beginning, it's got to be data driven. Whatever you do, it's got to be data driven. Well, guess what? It was, you know, Matt Heffenreffer and Process First, you know, thank you to you guys for funding them because they turned out to be just incredible. You know, Matt worked weekends, nothing was too difficult for him. So we started with opinions and we ended up with data-driven decisions. And I think, you know, that is, anyone who thinks they can solve this without the data, you know, that's just not true. You know, we had 2 public input sessions. Both of them, I think one had like 150 people, one had 160 people, and we listened. And then when we'd listened, we got back together again and spent more and more hours discussing what we just heard from people. So, and we heard it from all sides, you know, of the argument. And I feel good that we, you know, inclusion sometimes is difficult and it's definitely time consuming, but inclusion is the only way to get to consensus. And we listened and we listened and we listened and we got there. You know, Judy Barrett and John Giorgio are sort of unsung heroes in this because they guided us from the very beginning to the very end. And we revisited some parts of this with them 3 or 4 times, the zoning piece in particular. And you know what? They listened, they went away and huddled together, and then they came back and put us on the right track again. So, you know, those 2 people, both are experts. They did not have a horse in this race. You know, they just wanted to make sure whatever we were thinking about had some chance of being the right thing legally and from a zoning regulation point.
John, can you?
Yes, I can.
Wrap it up.
So I'm gonna leave it at that. It was I enjoyed the process. I'm still enjoying the process. As David said, we're not going away. And, you know, I will fight to the last day to get this article on the warrant and approved by the voters.
Thank you. Kathy?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I am so excited to be coming back to the island on Monday for the rest of the summer. So I will not repeat any of the things that both Peter and John have said. They're completely true. We all came from different places. We learned very well how to listen and learn, how to put yourself in someone else's shoes. We were all focused on the data and the facts and the fact that we needed to have a consensus to fit our framework and the charge that we were given. We understood that we had to consider the impacts to the local economy as well as to the town's revenue in what we were thinking of doing. We were surprised by some of the data and not surprised by some of it, but we used it. And in some cases, because of the public input that we had, we put some things in there that the data did not really support they were preventive. In other words, whatever it is, people don't want any more of it. So even though there isn't a lot of a certain behavior going on, that doesn't matter. It didn't matter to us because we put some stopgaps in there. The overwhelming, I think, feeling that we all had when we were done with this is that we'd been through the trenches. We'd done a lot of hard work. We'd all had to live with things we liked and didn't like, and we had to go through a long process to do that. We were very committed to the island. We all love the island for a variety of reasons, and we really were focused on not doing doing harm to people. So we did not want to harm people. Someone was always going to be harmed by any kind of regulation that puts in there, but we tried to make it so that was minimized, and that there was a benefit there. There was flexibility there. It can be changed in the future if people want to either make it more strict or less strict. And we were very, very focused on making sure that we would not be putting forward something that was subject to litigation. We want the litigation to stop. And the most important thing for me, or the biggest thing also, is just that we learned so much, as folks have said, about zoning, about what you can and cannot do in zoning, what's vague and what's explicit, how to use general bylaws to their best advantage. And so the package that we put together that links those two components and uses them in their best light and their best purpose, it's really a complex approach, and it kind of has to grow on you. And as you understand it, I'm not surprised at all that what we put out, people are looking at it and saying, oh no, that's terrible, that won't work because of this reason or that reason, or I don't understand it. And that's why I think we are all committed to wanting to be able to help provide the frequently asked questions, make sure that people understand what it is and how it impacts their personal situations. So our work is very much not done for that reason, as well as wanting to make sure that when the Board of Health on the application goes out there for registration, that we're collecting data that the town needs to be able to know whether, hopefully, assuming this passes, what those policies are doing and not doing, so that the future can things can change if they need to. Because every single town we spoke with said, don't think it's one and done. This is the kind of thing that you don't know what the outcomes are going to be. You can predict, you can plan for certain outcomes, but the market does change and things change, and they may not work the way you want them to. So I think it's an ongoing process. And we really, for me, I felt with Stacy not there anymore, and that's fine. That's a town decision to do, but we could not speak to one another or meet, or really, we were excited to put this to the select board. We wanted to keep meeting, and we felt that because we had no leader, we couldn't post meetings to the town. We couldn't do anything without violating public meeting laws, and we did not want to do that. So that's
Okay, Kathy,
what we
can you
did.
wrap up?
I am done. Thank you so much for having me be able to speak tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Karen?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I'll just say a couple of sentences because ditto what my fellow work group members have just been saying. I came into this decided to put my hat in because my family has been coming here to Nantucket since the 40s. And it's just our most special place. And so I came into it when I was chosen, just wanting to help families in general who love Nantucket, not just those who only get to be there part of the time, but who live there as well. I had no preconceived ideas about what this would look like or how we could come up, what the best solution would be. And I changed my mind about a lot of things as it went. So I really think this is an example of what can happen when people coming from all kinds of perspectives just listen to each other and have an open mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Julia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julia Lindner. I'm the Executive Director of Back Now, and I was on the work group. first, thanks a lot for allowing public comment tonight. I think there are a lot of questions on this issue. As the select board and the community knows, we have ACT Now has supported and brought forward different alternatives to town meeting and sort of for town meeting to consider. We have voiced reservations as this process started that the makeup of the work group maybe was slanted towards sort of the pro STR or the continued growth of STRs, but we definitely, even with those reservations, joined the work group knowing that we wanted to try to develop a solution. Everyone worked hard on this work group. There's no doubt about that. And I think the really great news is that we do have a lot more data than when we first started. And I think a lot can be learned by going back to a lot of that data. I don't think we took the time necessarily to parse through a lot of it. And there's a lot of good stuff there. Unfortunately, it did feel like we were on somewhat of a path. And I think what we have today, and I'm not sort of surprised to see that there is some concern at the select board level because this proposal does not, we don't believe, strike balance and is not a middle ground or somewhere that our supporters can get behind. I'll just reiterate, I think there is some of the work group members are saying that we sort of never, partook or we were definitely, I was part of all the conversations and very interested, but I think the whole proposal rests on this massive zoning change. And that's where our number one concern lies. This zoning change that would allow any property on Nantucket, anywhere on Nantucket, to be a full-time STR. And so that was our, this is the fundamental piece of this proposal that we just could not go along with. I think a lot of our supporters are really concerned that all of the existing STRs that wouldn't be able to comply with any of the regulations would be able to continue to exist. I think there definitely was a lack of sort of maybe understanding about if you're a neighbor of those neighboring STRs, how it might feel or how it might affect even your property value. And although some of the, the work group members sort of try to paint us as, we didn't necessarily go along or we didn't play along, the reality is it never felt like the group needed our vote because from the get-go, the proposal was we only need 7 out of 9 votes to come to a consensus and bring you an article. So I think it's sort of an extremely unfortunate that because we represented a small portion of the work group, we were sort of maybe left aside, but in reality, we believe that we represent a good portion of the population with their concerns about STRs. In wanting to protect the tourism economy, I can't stress that enough, like in wanting to protect residents' ability to short-term rent, but also protecting neighborhoods and housing. We didn't resign from the work group because we know there's a lot of work to be done. We know people want to see progress on this issue. We're definitely willing to, get back to the table or keep talking and keep working towards a proposal. We hope that with your leadership, we can get there. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Are there any other members of the work group present? Hop down. Please just identify yourself for the record.
Good evening. My name is Peter Kahn, and I'm a member of the STRG. I'm representing the ACNVT, Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers. And I filed a minority report, and I trust that you've received it and have read it. And I have not resigned. I rise tonight to speak on behalf of the ACNVT just to propose article number 3. I don't want to burden you with anything else. In fact, we support the rest of it, and I'll get to that in a minute. But article 3 is discriminatory on its face in that it provides 9 rental opportunities during the high season of July and August to those residing on Nantucket for more than 6 months and a day, and only provides 4 to all others. As such, it is unconstitutional under the Dormant Commerce Clause of the United States Constitution.
Mr. Khan?
Yeah.
Really, the question.
Well, I'm happy to speak later. You asked if there's anybody else here, so I'm happy to speak to that specific article later.
My question to the group was about the process.
I was fine with the process. I'm concerned with the outcome.
Yeah, we've received your
right
email, so
will we be able to speak to the articles later? I mean,
Yes.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
I'll speak to
Yeah.
it then.
I was really more interested in educating the community about the process at this point in time. Thank you. Any other members of the work group present? Okay. So moving on, I want to ask the board if they have any questions. There's a large number of the work group members here. Are there any comments or questions that you have following up from last week's? Tom, did you want to? Okay. From last week's meeting, first to the board.
Are we gonna have are we gonna listen to public comment or then
Yes.
come back to us?
Absolutely, but I wanted the board to have the opportunity to speak first.
I'll speak quickly. I think it's been misconstrued. I think that, you know, I was critical. I'm undecided on whether I'm gonna support this to town meeting or not. I'm undecided. So I haven't like made my mind up. What I brought up was some issues that I had brought up continually all along during this process. I spent, I spent hours watching. I came for the 8-hour session. You know, I've spoken to a lot of the members on this side. I've spoken to people on the other side, all the different aspects of this. And so I think there's a lot of good that has been, and I said that last week. I thanked everybody who said there was a lot of good work there, because there is. And there's some things that, you know, I wouldn't have thought of and other people might not have thought of. 4 instead of, you know, you're sort of defining accessory as at 4. That's that, you know, I hadn't really thought of that. And that would do some good for, you know, sort of the people who are looking at it from that perspective. I think that, you know, my biggest concern is, is the zoning. The biggest concern is that we will be parking this it sort of made it sound like sometimes it wasn't legal. Like some of the people I've talked to, it wasn't legal to put it in zoning. And, you know, so it could be a zoning. We could do this through zoning. We could do this through a bylaw. So I guess my question is why, you know, that both of those are possible. Why was who determined and why was it not done through zoning? Why are the main policies that you're promoting, why are they not in a zoning?
So that's a direct question. Is there?
I'd like someone to
is there
sort
anyone?
of explain, if we're asking to give people a chance to explain it, that's,
Yep.
you know, that has been my consistent concern.
Thank you.
Dave.
And just to
Dave,
go back to your,
Just
I'm
restate
sorry,
your
Dave
name.
Iverson, ex-member of the short-term rental work group, speaking for them, not for any other boards I'm on. And I think that, and I don't want to start this up again, but I think our problem last week was just that we thought we were going to have, it was going to be a discussion, and that's where we all felt bad. So that said, that done. So we kind of pawed over the zoning for a while. And part of our charge was to take a zoning bylaw that doesn't really contemplate short-term rentals. And so there's a lot of ambiguity there. And to take that ambiguity away and make it very plain and simple. I think the narrative that we're uncorking the zoning and short-term rentals are going to run wild on the island isn't accurate. You can have a short-term rental in any work group as long as you follow the bylaws. So you need to be permitted. Another reason we chose zoning is because the state gave us the ability to do that, and they did it for a reason. It is the only land use in this state that is not regulated in zoning. They gave us that ability in 2018 because they realized that the ambiguity in many zoning laws. And so with the state's wisdom, they gave us the ability to regulate through bylaws. They're more nimble. They have a much bigger bite when it comes to people not playing by the rules. And it gets rid of the ambiguity. I understand the accessory use argument. There's also a lot of true grandfathering arguments that can be made. Again, all this, biggest problem is all these new STR laws are unchallenged, right, in court. So that's why Town council will give us one answer one day, hedge it the next. We get it. But we in the group felt strongly that we needed to get rid of the ambiguity. We need to make it legal, and we need to make it legal in a way that we can regulate it in a nimble, functional way. And zoning doesn't regulate anything nimbly or functionally. And I think you could drive around the island and see many reasons or many examples of zoning bylaws that just aren't being followed. So we just felt strongly that this was the most robust way to regulate STRs. And I realize your fear and some other fears that people are going to come back to a town meeting in later years by a simple majority and wipe out all the zoning regulations, or I'm sorry, all the bylaw regulations we've created for STRs. It's a fear, but I don't think that that's really going to be the issue. So I hope that cleared it up a little bit.
Thank you.
Follow-up question?
You and I talk about this for hours.
I
but,
know.
You know, and we probably still won't agree.
Yeah.
I think that it was visceral for me when I see Y's in the use chart, and you said, you know, this hasn't been challenged. I think it's going to be challenged. I think it's going to be challenged. You know, we say, oh, let's make it legal everywhere this way, and then take care of it over here. And that'll get rid of lawsuits. I think that in my view of this is that we might be opening ourselves up to more lawsuits. And I think that the lawsuits will be challenging if someone is now doing it in a certain way that we say our bylaw says they can't do, they might be challenging that. And I think once we lose that, we have a yes sitting there. So one of the questions I had for Mr. Giorgio was, can we do it with an A? And I'd like him to explain whether we could and how that would impact what you're doing. Because I think you've done a lot of good work, and I think that was lost, you know, last week. I think people were, you know, feeling attacked or feeling unappreciated, and I'm sorry for that. That wasn't my intent, but I'd like to think that there's a way to do this that does not expose the town to some of these potential problems.
So I'm gonna,
Can I?
okay, quickly.
No,
And then I'm
just
gonna turn to
in reply
Mr.
to that,
Giorgio.
I think that we will have more litigation and more legal issues if we start taking away a legal accepted use that people have enjoyed for decades, and we take that away. We're much more in a position for litigation against the town, in my opinion.
So I'm going to kick that question to town council. Mr. Giorgio, if you could please explain a Y and an A for those of us who in the audience who may not understand the difference.
We're not in the weeds on this.
And then,
What they mean, yeah.
yeah. John,
Yes, Madam Chair. So, you know, Matt had asked me this question earlier, and I want to correct the record. I've never said that you cannot regulate STRs through zoning. The very first memo that I sent to the work group, which was last October, was I said that the way the legislation was written, you can regulate either by zoning or by a general bylaw. And what follows is you can do that in combination. So the problem with your current zoning bylaw is short-term rentals are not addressed. And so now we have 3 lawsuits pending where people are challenging the short-term rental use in residential zones. So from a starting standpoint, it was our recommendation, and I believe Judy Barrett had the same recommendation. It first and foremost needs to be addressed in zoning. And what the work group came up with is basically to change your use table to allow short-term rentals as of right in all zoning districts, except I believe in the CI district. That is going to eliminate the issue of whether short-term rentals are a permitted use or not. They will be allowed as of right. But the way the zoning bylaw is written, in order to enjoy that as of right use, there must be full compliance with the general bylaw that has all of these new sections regulating the operation of short-term rentals. And we think that is an elegant structure to achieve a couple of goals. One is remove the legal jeopardy, which I've been talking about forever, but having a robust system of regulations in place that will regulate the operation. Now, Matt has asked me to explain the difference between a Y designation and an A designation. So a Y designation, which is what Article 1 proposes, again, would be to allow short-term rentals as of right, as long as they comply with the general bylaw. Could you change that to A, which means accessory use? You know, the short answer is yes, you could. The problem with designating it as an accessory use, however, is that an accessory use must be incidental to the primary use. And so I fear that we would get into a lot of litigation depending upon the particular activity at individual locations. And I give the example of someone who takes out a mortgage on a property, and in order to afford the mortgage, they're going to rent it for as many weeks as possible, and maybe come down 2 weeks or a month in the off season to use it as their own residence. And the question would be, would that be an accessory use? Would the short-term rental be incidental to the primary use of residential? And I think that raises a lot of significant questions that will likely lead to more litigation. So that's why the recommendation from the professionals that were advising the short-term rental work group on this was to make it a Y use, get rid of that ambiguity, but have a structure in place that required compliance with all of the operational aspects. The other problem with regulating this through zoning from the outset is there is a whole line of cases, which I cite in my memo from last October, that basically says once you regulate an activity through zoning, you cannot thereafter change your mind and then regulate it through a general bylaw. Here, that's not what is being proposed. What's being proposed here is a two-pronged approach, having a robust general bylaw with specific requirements, but make it an allowed use under zoning. So that was the basis for the recommendation that we make it allowed as of right in all districts, subject to the general bylaw.
If I may ask a follow-up, with the set of articles that have been presented, with the making it a by right use in all zones except CI, if we have it in the general bylaw first, and then we further restricted could we further restrict it in zoning later by calling it accessory use? And would that make the bylaw moot, or could they coexist since the general bylaw came first? And if you don't want to answer that tonight.
No, so no, that's okay, Brooke. So are you talking about a zoning bylaw that makes it allowed as of right plus the general bylaw at the same time?
So I'm saying if this suite of articles passed at town meeting this year, and we decided we wanted to change the zoning bylaw at a later date, would that preclude the general bylaw from continuing
No.
the regulations?
No, it would. No, I don't think it would. What would happen, though, is by making this allowed as of right, then short-term rentals would become a protected use.
Okay.
And so if you went back later in zoning to change it to be more restrictive, then properties that had operated in accordance with the bylaw would be a protected use. But that's true with any zoning bylaw.
Yeah, and that's the grandfather. Once you've given it, it's very difficult. You can't take it away. So that's my point, is that we'd be giving this, and even we'd have the other things, and if anything changed, we wouldn't be able to go back and change it. Which is why I've been advocating for parking, the good ideas that they have in zoning and defining it as an accessory use, defining it as 4 weeks. Everybody that, if it's in zoning, everyone that has it now would be able to have exactly what they have now. I know Act Now doesn't like that, I'm sorry, but everyone that has it now would still have it, but it would be bound to those rules. And that way, in my mind, that way that going forward, you'd have accessory before. And I think that would actually have the impact that we were trying to have and be less challengeable. But that's, we can have you can all have a different opinion. So.
Malcolm.
Go ahead.
John.
So, we can certainly have a robust discussion about this. I'm not sure any minds are going to be changed, but I do think it's not totally accurate to say that we can, well, let me put it this way. As long as you leave in place the structure that is proposed in these bylaws, which is that any allowed as of right use for short-term rentals is subject to the general bylaw that says, for example, corporations are not entitled to obtain obtain a certificate of registration, or the 9 change of occupancy limitations. As long as they stay in place, any as of right use must comply with all of those requirements. And if they don't, then the use is not allowed as of right under zoning. And I know that may be sort of a complex concept to get across, but these two bylaws work in tandem. Now, from Matt's perspective, I know what he would say, and I don't mean to speak for you, Matt, but you would say, well,
it's okay.
A town meeting by a majority vote could, take away the prohibition against corporate ownership. And while that's true, it still would require a town meeting vote. And so the question becomes, what is the practical impact of a majority versus a 2/3 vote? I just think you have to look at all this entire package together. They were carefully crafted to achieve the result that the work group was looking for. And I just think if you try to go approach this all through zoning, you're going to have a number of unintended consequences. Grandfathering is a very specific concept in zoning. One of the issues we have now is, you're grandfathered only if you are a lawfully pre-existing non-conforming use. And I have no doubt that the opponents of short-term rentals on the island are going to argue that grandfathering does not attain because they were not lawful uses to begin with. I disagree with that. I agree with the building inspector's interpretation in the Zoning Board of Appeals, but you want to eliminate this as an issue in future litigation. And by making it allowed as of right, subject to your general bylaw, you are essentially protecting the town and protecting the residents from these lawsuits, which are only going to continue and multiply.
Madam Chair, I just asked a question to George because I've asked him a couple of times, and it goes about this whole issue of grandfather and zoning. The cases that are present, if they come back and say that our present short-term rentals are not legal, how would that affect us going forward? I never get a good answer to this. I'm sorry.
Well, Malcolm, I think I have answered that. You could call a special town meeting within 14 days notice and put something on the books that legalizes the short-term rental use, and then grandfathering whatever the judge's decision would be moot because you have now acted through a further amendment to the bylaw to make these legal uses.
So if I
Of
may,
course, if there was an adverse ruling from a judge, I would imagine the select board would want us to appeal that. And that's going to take time. And that would also give you an opportunity to maybe revisit some of these issues. But rather than react when you have a gun pointed at your head, excuse the pun, I think it's better to have a reasoned approach, which I believe the work group has proposed, that everything fits together and you can go forward with legal certainty to the extent anything is certain in the legal world, but that you've put forward a comprehensive set of regulations that would withstand a legal challenge.
Well, I think if I may just speak and then I'll be quiet again. I think Matt has some good points, and I am still concerned about the present regulations. Not that I think you did a lot of work and it's terrific, but I've taken a lot of flack this week for some of the things that I said last week. But I think it's my responsibility to ask questions. And if I don't ask questions and I don't challenge, then there's no reason for me to be here, period, or any of us to be here. And in my culture, when I grew up, or in 30 years of my work, I made many presentations and many of them were rejected. And that's just the way it is. And that was because I was challenged and questioned. So I will continue to do that. Thank you.
thank you, Malcolm. Any other questions or comments from the board at this time? Okay. I'd like to open for general public comment, and I'm going to ask Peter Kahn, since I made him sit down a few minutes ago. And I'm going to ask Tom to time us at 3 minutes so we can offer everyone an opportunity to speak, and then we'll see where we are at time, whether I invite people to come back to the mic for a second round of comments. So,
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Kahn,
Chair.
thank you.
Let me just pick up where I left off to save some time. I rise to object only to Article 3 on behalf of the ACNVT. It's discriminatory on its face in that it provides 9 rental opportunities during the high season of July and August to those residing on Nantucket for more than 6 months in a day, and only 4 to all others. As such, it is unconstitutional under the Dormant Commerce Clause of the United States Constitution in that it discriminates based solely on residency in matters of interstate commerce. I'm a lawyer. I was the only lawyer on this committee. STRs are a business. They turn your home, which is not a business, into a business by renting it out. As such, the cases have held, and Massachusetts Attorney General has held, that they are in interstate commerce, and therefore the Dormant Commerce Clause applies. Town Council found a prior version of Article 3 likely unconstitutional when it discriminated based on whether one had a Nantucket residential tax exemption or not. This current version that is now before you, which discriminates on the basis of whether one has resided on Nantucket for 6 months and a day, which, by the way, is the precise definition under Massachusetts law of a tax resident, is a distinction without a difference. It's the same. And as such, I subject to you, in my humble opinion, and that of the ACNVT, it will also be found to be unconstitutional. It's based on the Massachusetts Attorney General's opinion in the matter of Great Barrington's STR, which I urge you to read, as well as court cases from federal appeals courts in the 9th Circuit, the 5th Circuit, and our own 1st Circuit. Furthermore, Article 3 is presented, if Article 3 is presented to the town meeting and passes, it will be immediately challenged in the courts as being unconstitutional, and the town of Nantucket will needlessly have to pay thousands of dollars in defense costs. As I said, we support Articles 1 and 2. They do everything that is necessary to regulate STRs. Article 3 is superfluous, and let me tell you why. Article 2 already provides that everyone gets 4 rentals during the high season. And after 5 years, everyone gets 9. It also provides that if one can show hardship, one can appeal to a board to establish and seek a waiver and gain that additional rental opportunity. That's fair to everybody, residents and non-residents alike. It does not discriminate against anyone based on whether or not they live here for more than 6 months in a day. Furthermore, we provided an alternative to Article 3 if there's a real concern to protect those that need to SDR to stay afloat financially. As laid out in detail in my minority report, and I believe
Mr. Khan, that's 3 minutes. So if you could just wrap it up.
okay,
Thank you.
I believe Mr. McNabb mentioned this last time. We suggested 400% of AMI. If you're below 400% of AMI, which is $544,000, which is a substantial income, you get 9 automatically.
Okay,
So
thank you. Thanks so much. Emmy? And then I'm going to go online after Emmy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Emmy Kilvert. I'm just going to read a statement I prepared. After seeing the way the work group was being put together, I decided to sponsor Article 60 and work hard to educate the people on this issue. My fear was that the work group was going to come up with a solution and the community could not support. And that's exactly where we are. Not only would the proposed zoning article make sure that every residential home could become an STR operation, but it would also give special privileges to corporate and portfolio owners. For me and many others, this is a deal breaker. This isn't middle ground. Grandfathering properties that have been run as mini hotels in residential zoning is just wrong. This would devastate anyone who lives next door to one of these mini hotels. And it's what all of us should be worried about when our neighbor puts their house for sale. Who will buy it? What kind of quality of life will I have if an STR company buys it? By how much will my property value go down when people find I'm next door to a mini hotel? Instead of addressing these serious resident concerns, the work group's proposal protects these mini hotel profits. Town council is telling the town to legalize full-time STRs anywhere to eliminate any lawsuits. This does not sound logical or right. We should not run scared and give up our zoning. A better option would be to simply allow everyone to rent without allowing homes to turn into cash cow businesses. Please don't give in to the pressure I'm sure you're all feeling from big off-island money that wants to exploit Nantucket. This is our legacy to our children and future generations. We have to do what's right for Nantucket. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce Mandell online.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is.
I'll be brief. I sent them. Hello.
Yes, go ahead, Bruce.
Thank you. I sent a somewhat lengthy email to each select board member and some folks in town administration, trying to explain and detail some of the concerns the folks in the west end of the island have. And rather than go through a lengthy reading of that into the record, I asked that the document be placed into the record. And I just want to ask whether the select board members received and read that prior to this meeting, and if they have any questions or suggestions I might briefly comment upon. Thank you.
I can confirm that we received the email pretty late before this meeting, so this conversation is not going to end tonight. So Mr. Mandell, we do have it, and perhaps we can comment. I'm not prepared to comment on it. I did not have time to review it in detail today. I had other things before the meeting. So anyone else want to?
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. It was sent early this morning before 9 o'clock. I'm sorry you didn't get it until recently, but it was very complicated and we needed input from quite a few West End community members to create that document. So if there's an opportunity sometime In the future, I'm sure we would like to address that. And I have to say that the public input during this 25 meeting session of the work group, which I attended every one of them, was extremely difficult, limited, and frustrating. The 2 public forums were directed to only questions that were developed by the facilitator. And when we tried to make comments outside that framework, we were shut down. So it was frustrating. And I wanted just to get that information out to you relating to the several surveys that the Nantucket community has taken over the last 2 years, particularly relating to short-term rental concerns. And that information that I sent to you was also data-driven by those surveys. And I hope you appreciate that those surveys went out to a significant number of West End property owners year-round, seasonal, their guests, visitors, and other Nantucket and other Nantucket community members who expressed interest. So I look forward to being able to discuss that with you rather than just receive a cursory. Thank you for your comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mandell.
Madam Chair, if I may, real quick, I just want to, with all due respect to Mr. Mandell, I wholeheartedly disagree with his characterization that public comment was limited. It was equal at every meeting. We allowed it at the end for at least 20 minutes. We went over. We did hold 2 public forums. We received probably at least dozens, if not hundreds of letters, which I'm sure everybody on the committee read. Myself and Matt Haffenreffer from Process First spent almost 2 hours with Mr. Mandell and 2 other Nantucket residents answering questions. I just completely disagree with those inaccuracies. There was public comment was afforded at every chance. Thank you.
The gentleman who stood up before, I'm going to call on you next. And then I'm going to go online and then Mr. Vandoni after that. Okay. I'm going to try to manage as best I can. And we're early enough in the evening that we should have time for everybody in the room to comment. So if you could state your name for the record, please.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Ron Kokot. I've been a 40-year seasonal resident of Tom Nevers. And somewhere in the early 80s, my late wife and I were able to realize our dream of a Nantucket home, specifically because the island had made what I thought was a wise decision to house vacationing tourists in people's dwellings and not on enormous resort hotels built on every one of our beautiful beaches. So I think that's important. I've been following the work group debate. Actually, I've been following the SDR debate since 2019. I've attended on Zoom every single work group meeting and attempt to participate. And I believe the group, we've heard a lot tonight. I believe the group has done a great job of putting together a set of very reasonable and potentially very helpful solutions to a thorny, very poorly defined and very divisive topic. But I want to comment at this moment on something that was discussed last week very briefly, and that's in the work group's final report relating to the bylaw purposes. And it was talked about item number 5 in the bylaw purposes. Many have requested it to be changed. Item number 5, to remind you, says that number 5 states, limit conversions of residential units to SDRs. And I wholly support that goal, and I think that's a very laudable goal. However, item 5 goes on to say, which has had a deleterious effect of removing units from available year-round rental housing stock. And it's that piece that many have said has never been really debated, has never been agreed upon. But more importantly, as was said earlier, the group decided that any conclusions that were made would be made based on solid data. And in the entire period of the work group, there has never been any data showing a significant loss of year-round housing to short-term rentals. And I believe that's the case. And therefore, I believe that that statement should be changed as a minimum removed from item number 5. And once again, if we this issue is going to be debated for forever, and I don't think a statement like that should be allowed to stand, as it would be prejudicial to all future communications.
Thank you very much. You just almost at the 3-minute mark, little over. Mr. Vidoni? Oh, I'm sorry. I did say Robin Nides first, and then that is from online.
Hi, can you hear me?
Barely.
Any better?
Yeah, if you could just speak up, it's not coming through very loudly.
Okay. How about now?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay. I guess I'm just a bit puzzled, as I think many observers are, of why, with all due respect, Matt keeps coming back to pushing for accessory use when town council has warned repeatedly, including in this meeting, and I was an alternate on the work group as well, and John Giorgio has warned repeatedly about the limitations and the dangers of accessory use, that this leaves substantial ambiguity, which basically opens us up to, ongoing lawsuits. And instead of being fearful about zoning and the lawsuits that come to pass, we really should consider the current situation where there are people, 2 people who are currently facing lawsuits, 2 groups, 2 families. One is in their 60s, one is in their 80s. They're not corporations, they're not multi-STR owners, and they've been coming to the island for decades. And they are suffering today because of this ambiguity that exists, and there is an easy way to close it. So accessory use is not the solution. It allows continued shopping for jurisdiction and lawsuits. And I really would urge the select board and all to follow John Giorgio's advice as we have on the work group. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nides. Mr. Vidoni?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Bob Vidoni. For transparency, I am a member of Nantucket Together. For this public comment, I speak for myself, not for the group. We are not voters, my wife and I. We are part-time residents who spend 4 months throughout the year on island, and we do rent our home to Nantucket vacationers. We have been here since 1999. I'd like to thank the select board for the opportunity to speak tonight. I also would like to sincerely thank all the members of the short-term rental work group for your dedication and selfless service and countless hours spent on this most difficult task without compensation and with much unwarranted disrespect, in my opinion. I followed the process from the beginning and sat with you through most of the public zoning meetings and public Zoom meetings. It was amazing to watch the give and take and to see many of you make shifts in your positions in real time to reach your appointed mission of consensus. So thank you. My comment tonight is on something Mr. McNabb said during the select board meeting last week. At approximately 1 hour and 3 minutes into the meeting, Mr. McNabb began to relate the regulations to housing and quote, non-owner occupied short-term rentals. Mr. McNabb said, and I quote, at one point we're talking about housing. Here are 450 some houses. Is there an opportunity for us here? Has the Housing Trust ever looked at how, maybe leveraging, getting some of those into our stock? Maybe this is the time to do it, end quote. This sounds to me like The opportunity here is to have a public taking of private property through regulation with the hope that by declaring the currently legal use of private property illegal, owners will be forced to sell at fire sale prices. What does not owner occupied mean? Here less than 3 months or 6 months. It is beyond my understanding how the length of time one uses their property gives anyone the right to take it by whatever creative means they think possible. Will seasonal owners who do not do vacation rentals and whose houses are empty 9 or 10 months of the year be next to be told that their houses should be given up for affordable housing? Why is it assumed that these homes will become a part of our stock? Where is the data to support such an assumption? How does a $3 million, $5 million, or $20 million home become affordable or obtainable? Just because you think overregulation will cause a crash in housing prices does not mean houses will become affordable. The market will dictate that, and the market has shown there are plenty of buyers willing to pay high market prices for property on Nantucket. Many of them just tear down and build bigger, and the houses sit empty. There has been no data presented by anyone from the very beginning of this process that definitively proves that short-term rentals are the
Mr.
main
Vidoni,
cause.
that's 3
housing
minutes.
prices. Pardon me?
That's 3 minutes. If you could
Okay,
just
I
take a
just
second to wrap it up
I'll wrap it up quickly. I will.
quickly.
I will wrap it up very quickly. Well, I hope the recommendation of the short-term rental work group will be allowed to go to the special town meeting in November. Please do not allow 10 months of grueling work done by the group to be thrown into the trash can of town government. Let the voters decide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vidoni. I'm going to go to Peter Hoey online, and then you're up after that.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Can I be heard? Can you hear me?
Just speak up. We're having a little low sound over here.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Earlier, you asked committee members to discuss process. I'd like to do the same and not discuss the detailed elements of the committee's proposal. I have 2 comments. First, I understand the rationale a year ago to populate the short-term rental work group with voices representing both sides. In retrospect, that was a mistake. The proof lies in the flawed proposal the committee has put forth. Second, I have been involved in various businesses, nonprofits, and churches who have all made the same mistake. That mistake is to become impatient and rush to judgment. In each case, that rush to judgment has produced a worse situation than the problem they were trying to solve. I'm urging you to abandon the special town meeting and appoint a new committee comprised of truly independent and objective citizens to work with the data that is now available and propose warrant articles for next year's annual town meeting. At this year's annual town meeting, I quoted Voltaire, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I now say, don't let the flawed be the enemy of the good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Peter Halley. I'm the chair of your advisory committee of non-voting taxpayers. I just want to make 2 quick points that occur to me. And in part, they occur because of the very good questions that your board members have been asking. The first is with respect to the concern that general bylaws can be changed in the future to weaken the proposals. I hope you will ask council whether the opposite can also happen. In other words, for example, if after a number of years, it turns out that the nine rental limit during the high season or the creeping in of the 4 limit rental is not enough, could the general bylaw be changed by a majority vote to tighten that screw? Because my sense is that you can go either way on this. And so if your regulation is, you don't want to overregulate, and you want to be in a position to not overregulate, and you don't want to underregulate. The only evidence data that we have on this subject is on page 35 of the Process First data report. And I've provided a copy of page 35 with some written comments that I made over the last day or so. And that shows that under one view of the data, a nine rental limitation during those high occupancy months of July and August would produce about a 5% reduction in the number of rentals. And so my first question is, can you also tighten as well as loosen this regulation in the future? Because that might solve some of the concerns that are being voiced. The second is, I'm not hearing anything from anybody about what does this bylaw actually do. I'm only hearing, it grandfathers. But during July and August, there's that nine rental limit. That does something. There's no future corporate ownership, new corporate ownership. That does something. There is a sort of unraveling of individual ownership of STRs by presumably investors who are putting together chains of STRs. That does something. I think that when you all decide eventually to do whatever you're going to do, you need to look at these benefits that are in the bylaw and decide, well, are they good? Are they enough? Are they not enough? Would you maybe want to produce, have 8 instead of 9 or something like that?
If you could wrap up.
Yeah, so that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
Just, and I meant to say, is it Peter, right? Yeah, I was going to email you and I didn't have a chance. I think the number you're talking about, the 5% decline, did not include new dwellings that were built or added. And I asked Matt Haffenraffer last week, and he came back and explained that. And I think it went over just about everybody's head, but yeah.
Okay, there was a woman back there who raised her hand earlier. Do you want to? If you have to come to the mic, I'm trying to take people in order as I see them.
Good evening. My name is Donna Martino. I'm speaking for myself. I am a member of the advisory committee for non-voter taxpayers, but I'm speaking for myself. It's very obvious. It's very apparent. We have a lot more work to do on this topic. That's all I want to say. I love Nantucket. I want the best for our island. Thank you.
Okay, Jody.
Before I read what I wrote, I'd like to comment on something Mr. Khan said, which is that as soon as a house becomes an STR, it becomes a business. So perhaps the property should be taxed at the commercial rate. And then for the other individual who said there's no evidence of year-round housing being turned into STRs, I'll be happy to forward my email to that individual from my dog groomer of 10 years, whose year-round housing is being turned into an STR. There may not be data on it, but there's more than enough anecdotal evidence to show that that's happening. You just voted a 16% raise for the town manager on the advice of consultants she hired, while the island's teachers are fighting to eke out a new contract. In their last contract from 2020 to 2023.
Ms. Benz, is this related to the short-term
Yes,
rental
it is.
articles?
It is. It'll be coming right up.
Okay, thank you.
They received a measly incremental increase of 3.5% over the entire 3 years. It is no wonder then that there are currently over 30 vacancies in the school system, representing 9% of the workforce, with a majority of those being full-time teachers. Certainly, housing is a major difficulty in recruiting and retaining these professionals who are critical to the island's stability and future. Failure to use common sense is another. Why do I bring this up in the context of short-term rentals? Because it is a perfect example of the way the island's priorities have gotten completely out of whack. Overrides that it would have been unthinkable 5 years ago are causing our real estate taxes to increase double digits annually. Why? Are we spending money to recruit and retain teachers to do the very hard work of educating the island's increasingly diverse student body and pay them a fair wage? Apparently not. Or is it a higher priority to ask the taxpayers to subsidize and underwrite growing infrastructure expense caused by unrestrained growth, fueled by STRs and the loss of small year-round neighborhood houses to upscale accommodations, and then be asked to provide housing for service workers to accommodate all that growth, only to line the pockets of avaricious property developers and owners, realtors, and corporations that have now become, in recent years, little more than opportunistic gold diggers at our expense. The STR work group was doomed from the start because it started with a lopsided composition of members weighted in favor of the diggers. So I ask you, Select Board, and the community at large, how do we let our island's quality of life values and priorities be overtaken by greed? And what are you going to do to protect those of us who live here, who are also suffering from those who would destroy Nantucket solely for personal gain and profit? You have the opportunity now to find your North Star and resolve this conflict.
That's 3 minutes if you can.
For
wrap
all
up,
of our
please.
sakes, I hope you can find the courage and vision to reorient this island toward a brighter future than the one we face today.
Thank you very much. Ms. Duess?
My name is Ann Duez. I am here as an individual speaking for myself. I'd like to thank the short-term work group for the work they've done. It's been monumental for sure. And we've learned a tremendous amount about our island and who lives here and what we do here and how it works. I'd also like to thank the Select Board for your participation. But I particularly like to thank Matt and Malcolm for speaking out and calling a spade a spade. And that spade is a zoning law that does not put any brakes on any kind of development. Now, we've heard a lot of talk about how the bylaws are going to fix all of our problems. But I have a problem with this. I worry about this really a lot. Backing up 1 second for the zoning, I would prefer to see more baby steps in zoning. You can make a medium-term accessory use, in this case, step, and if necessary, get more restrictive. Once you take the most restrictive situation, which is the opening up, it's really hard to claw that back. So I would rather to see us, because we are still feeling our way. We still really don't get so much of what's going on. I would advocate for a more nuanced zoning. And I worry a lot about total reliance on these bylaws, because if there's one thing that I have learned in my time here, being more engaged in the whole public arena, and that is that enforcement on this island is very difficult. I have many times suggested that we could fix certain problems by simply enforcing the laws that we already have. And the answer I've gotten from many people in administrative and responsible positions is, yeah, that's a really good idea, but we don't have the staff to enforce. We can't enforce. It's just doesn't work. And so I am really worried about depending on an incredibly complex group of regulations to save us from those of us who live in neighborhoods that love it and like to have our property rights respected as well, to keep our neighborhoods. How are we going to really keep the cat in the bag with a bunch of regulations that I would submit are going to be virtually impossible to enforce over time, fairly, et cetera. And there's this undercurrent here of worry about legal exposure. I don't think there's any course here that is going to result in no legal exposure. So that to me is a red herring. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Slattery.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Catherine Slattery. I'm a year-round resident and a small business owner. And I'd just like to change the vibe a little bit by saying thank you, Town Manager. Thank you, Select Board. Thank you for the short-term work group. Everyone here in this room, every single one of us loves this island. And we want to be here and we care, because if we didn't care, we wouldn't be here. And we care a lot. But what I wanted to talk about is The community we live in is changing, and it's been changing since we all grew up here. But the thing that's ripping apart the fabric of this community is every single unit that transitions from a year-round unit into either a seasonal or a short-term rental. It doesn't matter if it becomes a summer situation or short-term. And who's crying? We all are. We're crying that our kids can't have houses here. They can't ever live here. We're crying because our staff is getting forced out of their housing. I have a young 18-year-old employee who's came here 6 years ago. He's a successful mechanic, an electronics expert, and he's been living in employee housing since he joined us. He's probably not going to stay on this island, even though he loves the solitude of the winter, even though he loves fishing, even though he's accepted in the community and a hard worker. He's not going to stay because he can't even have the dream of his own year-round rental, never mind home ownership. And this is what I want to ask is there a way that we can all work together to help fix this and not shoot arrows at each other, but really work to say, can we come up to solutions? Thank you for all the work everyone's done, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ms. Slattery. Mr. Holland? Did you want to?
Tucker Holland, really here as an individual. I appreciate the change in tone, and really, I kind of wanted to do the same thing. This is a very difficult subject, and I get asked about it all the time about my opinion. And I said, if this is easy, we would have solved it a long time ago. I'm very grateful to all 9 members of the work group that have been working diligently to arrive at solutions that can work for the community. I don't know the answer. I simply want to say thank you.
Thank you. Grant?
Hi, everybody. Grant Sanders. I missed town meeting 2 years ago because I got COVID. I think, Madam Chair, you and I got COVID in the same room. Is that right? We're not going to start any rumors here.
We did, yes.
All right. I missed last town meeting because it was my uncle's 80th birthday, my favorite uncle. So I feel a little out of the game here, but I've noticed something, and I just want to echo something that Tucker said. And
Can you pull the mic closer to your mouth? Yeah.
I just want to echo something that Tucker said and something the previous speaker said, that a lot of people have been talking about this issue out of fear. Okay. A lot of people have been talking about losing a right or losing their housing, and I really feel as though we need to figure out a way to nibble away at this issue and not try to hit a home run every time we go to town meeting. So I don't know whether this measure that the work group has brought forward is perfect. It's probably not, but I respect everybody's efforts and good faith in bringing it forward. And so I guess what I would like to say is I was involved with Act Now early on in this whole issue, and I had to get out of it because of the toxic nature of the comments that were happening online and in the grocery store. And I was glad to get COVID and not go to town meeting 2 years ago. And I was glad that my uncle had his 80th birthday at town meeting, because I didn't want to be exposed to that toxic nature. And I think what I'd like to say to everybody who's listening at home and everybody in the room is, let's stop making decisions based on fear. Let's start making decisions based on what's good for everyone within the island, and just realize that short-term rentals are a resource like moorings are, like sewer hookups are. And we ought to treat it that way. Not everybody can have a mooring. Not everybody can have a sewer hookup. So let's just take a look at it from a public policy standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Eric Hilton. I live at 3 Meadowview. And first, I'd like to thank Matt and I'd like to thank Malcolm for taking a stand for those of us who realize that what we do as families is very different from what we do for our investment purposes. The second thing I think is important to understand from my perspective is that this whole issue is a continuum. Individuals who rent their homes part-time, individuals who then move out of their homes and rent their homes as another step forward. Corporations who decide to have rentals in commercial districts, and then there are corporations and groups of investors who wish to invest in neighborhoods. I would draw the line there. That needs to stop. We can do all the other things, whether it's bylaws, whether it's zoning laws, all of that is mechanics, right? The key is, where do you want to draw the line in order to preserve what we cherish most about this island? The character, what Mr. O'Shaughnessy had written about in the Inky Mirror, right? It's unfortunate why he had to write it, but it is very true. There are many, many facets of living here that we all take advantage of, but at some point it is going to deteriorate, and it's going to deteriorate when commercial interests invade residential neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, this is the first time I've ever spoken, so I hope I'm coherent. Not spoken here. My name is Virginia Bedoni. We've been here since 1999. My husband spoke. And we have been short-term renting to the same families that come back pretty much every year, who we've gotten to know over time. I don't understand a few things. I don't understand why we're talking about corporate rentals or corporations buying up the island when the bylaw stops that from happening. That from now on, if this passes, from now on, corporations that want to buy on this island are not allowed to. So I don't know why we continue to have this conversation. That's what this does. So I just wanted to say that everybody needs to realize that this would stop immediately going forward. And that's really important. Thanks.
Thank you. I have one more hand up online, Rick Atherton.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you very much. Just an observation. I find the real gravamen of this proposal is 42 last year all over again. And I think that's a real problem. I want to thank Peter Hoey for making a very practical, sound recommendation. Let's slow down a little bit. Everybody think about what the best solution is. So I think he had a great way to look at it. And in connection with that, I think, again, I'm going to repeat myself. If 42 goes forward, I'd be very pessimistic about it getting through town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to ask the board if they have any further comments. And I just, before I do that, timeline wise, we do not meet next week. These articles will be on the agenda again in 2 weeks. And then our timeline for finalizing the warrant is August 16th, and we don't have a meeting on August 9th. So we have one more week for discussion on this. And would like to ask for some direction from my fellow board members on where you'd like to take this, whether this is about just a couple ideas, whether we present to each other next week, suggestions for amending what's been presented to us. Do we have further questions for town council? Where does the board want to take this on our way to establishing the final warrant on August 16th for special town meeting?
Madam Chair, I think John had his hand up before. I just want to make sure he's has or has not a comment.
John, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Are you asking this, John?
Yes, your digital hand was up for a long time and then you took it down.
No,
So
I
it's-
took it down.
No, I'm sorry.
Forever.
I think it went up right after Robin Nides talked.
Did you?
I'm all set. I have no further comments unless
Okay.
you have questions.
Thank you very much, Don. Tom, did you have anything on the process from here to there? Or anything else?
Anything? I guess I would just quickly say that I found the process very interesting. I think we all did our due diligence and spent a lot of time on it, as many of my other work group members have stated. And I thought it was a transparent process. I thought we took a lot of public comment, and we were charged with coming up with consensus. And per Mr. Giorgio's comments before, and Judy Barrett, on exactly why we found consensus around the zoning article and the general bylaws as they are, and the a la carte articles, was exactly the reasons he stated. And we could have done something that would have been very complicated in the time that we had, which was to come up with a number as a cap. We could have chosen, okay, well, there are 2,574, it's thereabouts, of short-term rentals. Not all of them are rented all the time. So we're going to do 2,000, we're going to say 2,000 and with attrition and et cetera. That there was not consensus for that, in my own opinion. It would have been very complicated to choose a number. But the levers that we chose that are in the general bylaw, for the reasons that I think Mr. Giorgio laid out, very legal, obviously his legal opinion, but also that was the sentiment of the group, of where those who supported consensus came up with, that it's that the beauty of that it's changeable is that it's the democratic process. And that if those general bylaw provisions are found to be too strict or not strict enough, then a citizen or the select board, et cetera, can come back in a following town meeting and try and pass it. It's exactly what happened in Great Barrington, which is where we largely took the corporate definition from for our own draft general bylaw. And their provisions were attempted to be rolled back at their town meeting this year, which largely failed. And that's just part of the democratic process. And I would say, from my own standpoint, I stand behind the work that we did. I think we came up with a package that, while it may not be perfect or solve every issue, that maybe it's version 1.0. And it can be part of the town meeting process and select board process and the democratic process. And it is changeable. It's not final forever. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how we move forward. I'm struggling with it, as you know, and I'm struggling because I'm not in good conscience. I don't think I can support a Y in the use chart, because that isn't taking a small step. That's potentially opening the door permanently. And, to say it's I have experience with, 2/3 and 50%. We put the sewer. That was a very contentious issue about 20 years ago. We had sewer, and there was one side of the argument that wanted the sewer to be the whole island paid by the taxpayer. There was another side of the argument that said, you know what, we want to make sure we're careful. The taxpayers can't afford this. So what we did is we had that be 2/3. It had to be a 2/3 vote to change. And it was a 50% vote with the select board. And that has really worked. We have a process now, and it protected the taxpayers, and it really did what we hoped it would do. That's one of the things I'm worried about with this. I don't want it to be people think that I don't think a lot of what's in there is good. The cottage colony and so you have a lot of things in there that I think the 4, I would, I think was genius to define accessory as 4 or less, treat everybody the same. I'm with Peter Kahn on the treat everyone the same. But the only thing I don't like is I just worry. Oh, I'm still torn. I think there's a way to park it in zoning. I think that could be done. And I also am a data guy. So if this is so good, prove it to me with data. Don't prove it to me by telling me how hard you've worked, which you did. I've worked hard. You've worked hard. I think that's, we all know that, but prove it with the data. You say, this is what we're going to do. Here's the impact it's going to have. Here's how many houses there are. People are saying there's no proof that that what has happened recently has impacted year-round housing. Well, year-round housing, even though we've added Richmond and a bunch of things, is relatively flat over the last 15, 20 years from the data that you guys all saw. And the other housing is up. And so there is, and you can't prove it. It's not 1 for 1. There's no, regression analysis that's 100% proof, but there are there's fewer year-round houses here we've been building 150 homes a year, building and renovating 150 homes a year. And we have about the same number of year-round as we did. So that's and that'll hopefully change, but it's been subsidized by us. So we're going to do it. We're going to subsidize forever now. Is every home that's going to be done going to be subsidized? I hope not. But I think, so those are the issues that we really have to come together on. And I think, again, I think you guys did a lot of really good stuff, and I'm not sure, but the yes is really difficult for me. Thank you.
I have a lot of the same concerns as Matt. There's a lot of Article 42 in there, and I've talked about that. That concerns me a lot. It's been talked about by several people. I have some concerns. And this whole idea, I brought it up last time about housing. Yes, there's not great data, but I think everybody in this room, and I think everybody in Island can tell you of someone they know that's lost a house because it's become short-term rental. And I'm sorry, that's solid data as well. Again, I'm a data person too. It was my business, but that to me is very convincing to me and very concerning. That's why yes, commercial, yes, corporations, but what about all those houses that are not necessarily owned by a commercial, but are being bought for short-term rental only? And we're losing that in our housing stock. And I don't see how these regulations address that. So I have to do a lot of thinking about this some more. Thank you.
So I see it very differently. I see the 4 contracts on future acquisitions as a significant financial disincentive for the investor owned property, a person who must short-term rent to be able to afford to own. I don't know how we prevent seasonal buyers from buying on Nantucket. I think that there's a component here that has nothing to do with short-term rentals. It's that people can afford to buy homes here with or without the need to short-term rent. And they are acquiring homes in year-round neighborhoods because the affordability is in those neighborhoods. And it is my belief, as someone who's worked on affordable housing for quite a while here, that the short-term rental piece has had a component, but I feel like this group really addressed it by making the financial model of 4 contracts on new acquisitions eliminate most of the buyers who could only afford to buy if they could do a full season of short-term rentals. So I think that has the potential to reduce demand in year-round neighborhoods. And then I think fundamentally, Matt, to some extent, that horse is out of the barn. We are going to have to deed restrict homes, and that is going to require subsidy. And that is how we're going to address the availability of year-round housing long-term. I cannot, in my mind, think of a way of how we stop people who want to spend the summer here or own a summer home here from buying anywhere in town. And so that we need to be moving into the market and acquiring deed restrictions before houses go on the market to retain them in the year-round family. So they don't even go on the market and are not even available to anyone, whether they short-term rent or not. So I actually believe in this process. I believe that this group worked together, made compromises, and they've come up with a framework in my mind that allows us flexibility as we acquire more data and we see what trends are in the industry going forward to change these, the general bylaw to suit the priorities or needs or goals in, as we understand better the impact of the short-term rental industry on year-round housing, on all the economy, visitor nights, all of it. I think we just don't know enough, but not knowing enough is not a reason to wait. In my mind, it's a reason to start here and then amend going forward. And that's where I'm at. And that's where I hoped we would be when we engaged in this. And it's not exactly what I would have written if I were queen of the world, but I'm not. So anyway, I appreciate the discussion tonight. I'd love my fellow board members to consider what our path is to setting the warrant. Because that's the biggest question we have before
What
us.
if we tie 2-2? Does it not go? Does it fail? What's the?
So John, are you still there in terms of being able to talk about the process toward the warrant? Or should we pose that question for you to come back to us next week?
Brooke, that's a really interesting question. The tradition in Nantucket has been that in the run-up to town meeting, the town manager provides the select board with a list of warrant articles. And that includes obviously departmental articles, petitioned articles, appropriation articles, and that's presented to the board. And then the board can certainly decide, no, we don't want to go forward with a particular article. And ultimately, the board has to approve the warrant and sign it. And I have advised publicly that the decision to approve the warrant and sign it, all 5 members of the board can participate in that discussion and vote. So it would not necessarily, I don't know, it wouldn't be a 2-2 vote, but I don't know what the outcome of that would be if all members voted on that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I recall, before the last town meeting, it was sort of my first time before a town meeting on the board, and we never really voted. We kind of discussed. There was never a formal vote.
No, we have to vote to accept the warrant.
Yeah, well, we did, but I remember there was discussion. I'll have to go back and look at the minutes. We
vote to accept.
We adopt the warrant.
And I
we
voted.
adopted it, but I'm not sure we actually voted. Well,
yeah,
I'll go back and look at the minutes.
Yeah, and I've opposed putting certain things on. I haven't won, but a couple of times I've opposed because I thought certain things weren't done and it wasn't ready yet. But so that's happened as well. I know that.
I mean, not to take it forward is a significant step. It would be for me because we are not the legislature, the town and the people are the legislature. And so that's something I have to mull over in my head. Because I've certainly made it public where I stand, but at the same time, the legislature is the people.
So,
Madam Chair, I would also point out that the board routinely provides comments and recommendations, primarily when the Finance Committee puts together its booklet of motions. And that's certainly something that the board has the option of doing here. I think only 4 members could actually vote on recommendations, and that can be a recommendation to approve or disapprove. So I think you may be in a situation this year or at this special town meeting where you may want to consider a more robust set of comments by the select board, and they can be, it wouldn't be a majority or a minority report because it would be a 2-2 vote, but you could certainly have individual comments or two sets of comments that go on the warrant. If I'm making sense there.
So now I'm confused, John. So just let me clarify. So Dawn can vote for the adoption of the entire warrant.
Correct.
But can she vote on this individual article to put it on?
Well, I think, Matt, I think the tradition and practice in Nantucket has been the warrant is prepared by the town manager, and it includes all of the articles that are submitted by petition, and certainly board members can vote to add an article to the warrant. But I don't think the tradition has been that the board votes yes or no on every warrant article. I think ultimately, whether it's implicit or not, the board approves the warrant and signs the warrant. And then you go forward with town meeting.
I think we actually do. Are you okay? We get a lot. Are you okay with that? A lot of times it's consensus, you know, yeah.
That's what it was.
Yes, it's a lot of times it's consensus. Libby will say, are you okay?
Right.
Yeah, we're okay. And then when when there are articles that we, you know, are not okay with, we speak up, and, you know, so I think that's, it's been a combination. I know it may not be a.
It was a combination. Madam Chair, I vaguely remember saying, well, there's some articles that I don't really have questions about, and we never really voted on them, but we sort of had consensus.
I think in discussing the individual articles we did, and then we discussed whether we wanted to have comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
adoption of the warrant as a whole itself is a vote.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess, are we comfortable as a board with asking the town manager to prepare the warrant, including these proposed articles to work its way through the process with a final and with discussion about possible changes or amendments to specific elements of these, or
Well-
I'm a little stymied.
No, well, this is, I think, Madam Chair, we're all a little stymied.
It's a little unprecedented. Yeah.
Yes, I think
It is.
I think
Yeah.
everyone in the room's a little stymied too. But I mean, in theory, it'd be nice to put amendments, but boy, to put amendment on in one meeting and debate it and discuss it, and
It's not gonna get done.
it's
Yep.
it's going to be cumbersome and it's going to be rushed, and it might make everything actually worse.
So,
I wouldn't be in favor of that.
okay, so at this point, we charged a work group to come up with work product, which has been presented to us, which is a package of articles to go on a special town meeting warrant in November. Are we comfortable moving those articles onto the warrant at this time? And I asked the question, we don't have to decide tonight. We have
No, I
a
think-
couple of weeks. Are we there yet, or
I
should we
think, I
wait?
think the articles need to be put onto a warrant, and then how we ultimately decide and vote is another question.
Erica?
And we still, excuse me again, I still didn't hear where Dawn would be voting.
So let's pose this question for town council to return an answer to us next week,
That'd be
which
great.
is, if the town manager prepares the warrant with these articles on it, what are the options of the board between that point in time and the date we must adopt the warrant on August 16th? What are our options in terms of discussion and votes on articles contained in that warrant prepared by the town manager? Does that, have I posed that in a way that makes sense to the rest of the board?
Madam Chair, that's better than I would have.
Okay, thank you. Is that,
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think what John pointed out is interesting about maybe trying to flesh out the comments, the select board comments.
Yep.
Because if we do adopt the full warrant with these warrant articles, any of us could make comments, or, you know, maybe coming up with one statement for all 5 of us would be difficult, but that could be a way. So we could each show what we really think.
and that, I mean, typically the practice has been that we don't comment unless we have consensus on a comment. So this would be different from practice. And I think there's an opportunity for us to discuss moving away from that practice in this circumstances and see where we stand when we get to the 16th of August.
But we'll have to come with our comments ready if we'd like to make them. You know, we're a lot of times we say, speak on town meeting floor and, you know, have your say then. If you know, but either way, I mean,
we can.
So, Matt, if I may, once
Yes,
the
John.
warrant is signed, the finance committee is going to go forward with preparing the motions booklet. And I believe that typically select board comments are added to the finance committee booklet, which will be a later date than the 16th of August. So I don't think you would need to necessarily have your comments ready for insertion in the warrant on the 16th, but certainly before the motions booklet goes to print, you would want to have, you know, those comments incorporated into the motions booklet.
yeah, the other comment, the other thing for you to think about, John, I get worried sometimes because you can't have something that's more restrictive at town meeting. So I worry about scope and some of the things that we've talked about that might be changes that, you know, people might try to make at town meeting floor, et cetera, you know, or zoning versus a bylaw. If someone wanted to bring that forward, that might be called out and be out of scope. And so, you know, how do we, so I'd like to know, John, if it's possible that some of that, I would just like to understand what the, you know, sort of what the ballpark will be for anyone at town meeting on this. Because if one is tighter than the other, you can't do that. People weren't told, you know, so I think we need to get that straightened out too. So it would inform the public and us, you know, how that will be handled.
So Matt, I think you could vote on a warrant that take the accessory use versus the allowed as of right. You could have 2 separate warrant articles, one with a Y and one with an A. And then, so that would get rid of your scope issue at town meeting. But obviously only one of those could pass at town meeting. So there is a way to avoid having an out of scope determination made by the moderator if you have those 2 separate articles on the warrant.
But then we hit the same problem we have here. You've got to get, you know, three out of 4 of us probably to put that on, correct?
Yes.
So it seems to me there's not going to be a lot, like that's not something, although I think that there could be something fashioned that would, you know, sort of would take care of the principles and take care of what the group has come up with, but, you know, sort of solve some of the concerns that people like myself have. I think that is possible, but I'm not sure that it will happen. It's just because of the timing and because of the vote. I think that people have kind of dug in a little bit. So that's why I'm trying to figure out how to get, you know.
Well, this is a difficult issue, Matt. There's no question about it. I would really encourage the board members to look at selectmen comments in the finance committee booklet as a way to get your point or anybody's point across. And there might be you know, 2 of you do not recommend, 2 of you do recommend, you state the reasons, everything's in that report. So at least the voters will have an opportunity to understand and consider your perspectives. I think that's the best way to approach this myself.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, and my point is I'm trying to find a path that where we could be united on it. That's what I'm talking about. Is there a way to take the policies and the levers, as you call them? I don't call them levers, but take the levers and put them in, have John's help and put them in zoning, put them in a way that would be acceptable, treat everyone the same, put them in a way that's acceptable, that will get a 2/3 vote. That's what I was hoping. But I'm not sure how to get there.
I would say if my fellow board members have an alternate proposal that they want to craft to bring, I'm open to considering, but talking about it in principle right now, we don't have time to continue to talk about it in principle. I think it has to come forward as a concrete proposal for us to consider at our next meeting.
John, are you available to help craft that if one of us wants to do that?
Well, I hate to admit it, Matt, but I drafted all of the work group articles, so why not?
Yeah,
I can certainly provide that help.
Yeah. So that would be the route that, and then we have something concrete to look at and discuss as a group of four and
Okay.
see whether we want to go a different, add or go a different direction from what the work group has brought to us. I think it's only fair for me to consider that personally. So.
Madam Chair, could we ask Judy Barrett or an appropriate zoning expert to weigh in on that at the same time?
Yes, I would
Just from a
invite them
different perspective.
both back to that meeting. Yes, please. Okay. Are we comfortable with the direction we're headed on this? As
Sure.
comfortable as we can be
Yeah,
under
I
the
was gonna say-
circumstances, I should say.
I was
Okay.
going to say that, but yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, great. Thanks to everybody for participating in the discussion tonight. I really appreciate the time and energy that people are putting into it. Erica, did you have something you wanted to say?
I did. I just wanted to respond to Dr. McNabb's comment about not voting to adopt the warrant in the past. On January 25th, 2023, Ms. Moore moved to adopt the May 6, 2023 town meeting and May 23rd, 2023 town meeting election warrant as discussed, seconded by Dr. McNabb, so voted.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we cleared that up. That's amazing. Recordings are recordings. Okay. Any committee report, monthly town manager report. Libby, I was going to give you a pass by skipping over, but.
Well, I did have one thing. I don't have a written report tonight, but I wanted to update you a bit on something that I have mentioned previously about the Town Council Study Committee and how that is potentially going to progress once people are appointed. So I think that I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I was trying to have a conversation with the Mass Municipal Managers Form of Government group. And I did have a discussion today with the chair of that group, who is the town manager in Bridgewater. And the highlights of that discussion are just generally as follows.
Excuse me, could you guys? Thank you.
The advice is that the committee would, once constituted, would review a variety of options to change Nantucket's form of government. Any effort to change government requires a significant amount of planning, preparation, and outreach. That was, it's obvious to me, but it doesn't seem obvious to other people. There are a number of issues associated with the town council form of government that need to be determined, including roles, administrative rules, appointments, other related matters. I think people understand this, but the charters of other towns should be reviewed and the data from those gathered as to what we like about them, what we maybe don't like about them. And someone's going to need to compile all of that. The committee is going to be tasked with quite a bit of data gathering and outreach. It's recommended that there not be more than one member from any particular group appointed to the committee, that it not be too large, that it represent a cross section of the community. Some of these things are kind of obvious. And then a facilitator be engaged. I do have some names for that. I have not yet reached out to them to determine interest availability or cost. It's on my list of things to do as soon as I can clear up some other things on my desk. There are no funds specifically appropriated for hiring a facilitator, so we'll have to determine where those would come from if we're going to go down that road. And I will keep you updated as I explore this possibility of a facilitator. So I just wanted to give you an update on that.
Thank you, Libby. Any committee reports? Nope.
I think, I'm trying to think. There's something, but I can't remember it now.
Yeah, it's
I'm-
been a
I'm
long night.
fried.
Yeah. The next item on the agenda is adjournment. Anyone up for that?
So
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, by roll call, Tom Dixon.
And somebody second,
Oh,
just in case.
yeah, Matt, Don, can you just second, Matt?
Second.
You both said
That's fine.
moves. Okay. All right, great.
I didn't hear
Thanks. All right. So Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Hi.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
And Brooke Moravitz. Aye. Thanks, everybody.